The woman who never left his heart. Diane Keaton and the love that defined Al Pacino. At 85, Al Pacino has lived long enough to see his name carved into the very foundation of cinema. He is the face of The Godfather, the thunderous voice of Scarface, the restless soul of Scent of a Woman. Yet, behind the applause and immortal lines lies a truth he finally admitted only after Diane Keaton was gone. "I found the one person who made me want to stay, and I let her go." That's a mistake you can never undo. For half a century, Hollywood wondered why Pacino, a man surrounded by beauty, adored by generations, never married. The answer, when it came, was not about arrogance or freedom. It was about regret. Their story began in the early 1970s on the set of The Godfather. He was the intense young actor from the Bronx, eyes burning with ambition. She was the new face of wit and wonder, bringing warmth into the cold, brutal world of the Corleones. Between long hours under blinding lights and the hush between takes, two lonely souls found each other. She later confessed, "From the first moment I saw him, I went crazy for him." For Pacino, who mistrusted the idea of permanence, Diane was unlike anyone he had known. She understood his silences, his storms. They didn't need grand gestures. A shared glance across the set was enough. When cameras rolled, their chemistry was so real that audiences believed it long before they did. Off camera, their connection deepened into something quiet, private, almost sacred. Through the success of The Godfather 2 and 3, their love survived fame, distance, and Pacino's unpredictable temperament. Diane dreamed of a home. Al dreamed of escape. She wanted a family, a place to land after the chaos of acting. He wanted to keep moving, chasing roles, chasing meaning. Their love was passionate but fragile, constantly at war with his fear of belonging. In 1989, Pacino made what he would later call his one fatal mistake. He became involved with acting coach Jan Tarrant, fathering a daughter, Julie Marie Pacino. Diane, heartbroken, walked away. When she gave him the final ultimatum, "Marry me, or we're done," he said nothing. His silence was his answer. By the time The Godfather Part 3 wrapped in 1990, their story had ended, at least publicly. But privately, Pacino carried her with him through every film, every empty hotel room, every award night. Friends said that even decades later, he would pause when her name was mentioned, eyes softening as if remembering a line from a play he never finished performing. When Diane Keaton died in 2025, Pacino did not attend the funeral. Instead, he sat in his dimly lit home, surrounded by photographs from their youth. Diane in her wide-brimmed hat, laughing between takes, a candid shot of them holding hands. Unaware of the camera, he whispered, "If only I hadn't let her go." For a man who has spoken countless scripted words, those few unscripted ones became his truest performance, a confession born of silence. That day, Al Pacino finally became what he had always feared most, a man alone with his masterpiece and his memories. The philosophy of non-commitment, when fear became his religion. After Diane left, Al Pacino didn't immediately grasp what he had lost. Filming, fame, the endless blur of lights and scripts, all of it dulled the ache for a while. But in the silence after the crowds went home, the truth followed him everywhere. She had been the one person who made him want to stay. And he had chosen to walk away. That decision hardened into a philosophy he would live by for the rest of his life. Love, but don't bind. It was not cynicism, but defense, a shield against the pain he had already seen destroy so many around him. In his 2016 memoir Sonny Boy, Pacino wrote, "I didn't want to board the train of pain. Once you promise forever, forever becomes the first thing you lose." To understand that fear, one must look further back. Long before Diane Keaton, there had been Jill Clayburgh, his first great love in the late 1960s. She was bright, idealistic, and deeply patient with the young actor still struggling to pay rent. Jill wanted marriage, a home, stability. Pacino wanted freedom, not from her, but from the weight of expectation. When she finally left, he promised himself never to make a promise he might break again. Through the decades that followed, he lived by that vow. He loved many women, actresses, artists, dreamers, but kept each one at arm's length. With Marta Keller, the Swiss actress he met in 1977, The romance burned hot but fell apart under the pressure of fame and constant travel. With Jan Tarrant, he found a strange comfort that led to the birth of his daughter, Julie Marie. In 1989, he adored the child but admitted that the relationship itself was built on guilt and confusion. Lyndall Hobbs, an Australian director, offered him peace for a time, yet her desire for family frightened him. "She wanted the rest of my life," he once said. "I didn't even know who I'd be next year." And then came Beverly D'Angelo, who gave him something close to the family he had once rejected with Diane. Their twins, Anton James and Olivia Rose, born in 2001, became the quiet joy of his later years. But even that love turned into a battleground when his need for control clashed with Beverly's longing for freedom. The split in 2003 was bitter, a mirror of every wound that had come before. By the time he reached his 70s, Pacino had turned solitude into an art form. He told friends that marriage was a beautiful cage, and he had already spent his entire life breaking out of cages, first from poverty, then from Hollywood's labels, and finally from the promises that people expected him to make. "I love women," he said in a rare interview, "but I love them best when they're free. That way I don't have to watch them walk away." To outsiders, it looked like arrogance, a man too selfish to settle down. But to those who truly knew him, it was grief masquerading as wisdom. Diane's absence had carved something permanent into him, the belief that loving deeply meant eventually losing deeply. Every time he saw her on screen, her smile in Annie Hall, her laughter in Something's Gotta Give, he was reminded not only of her brilliance but of what his fear had cost him. She had wanted a home, a family, a partner. He had wanted to keep his heart safe. In the end, both of them were left alone, each keeping the other's ghost for company. By the time he wrote the final pages of his memoir, Pacino admitted what he had once sworn never to confess. "Freedom without love is just another kind of prison. You tell yourself you're escaping pain, but all you're doing is keeping it alive." That single sentence became his quiet repentance. And when Diane died, that philosophy, once his armor, felt like a curse. The price of greatness, loneliness as his final companion. As the sun begins to set on Al Pacino's remarkable life, the once fiery rebel of cinema now lives quietly inside a vast, echoing house in Beverly Hills. The walls are lined with memories, black and white photographs from Serpico, Scarface, and The Godfather, shelves filled with awards, a piano that hasn't been touched in years. Yet, amid all that brilliance, there is an unmistakable stillness, the kind that only follows a man who has loved deeply, lost completely, and spent a lifetime learning to live with ghosts. Pacino often says he is not lonely, only alone, but those closest to him know the difference is paper thin. His days are slow and reflective now, long walks through the garden, nights spent watching old films with a glass of wine. Sometimes he revisits the one that started it all, The Godfather, when Diane Keaton's voice fills the room as Kay Adams. He doesn't move, doesn't speak, he simply watches, as if trying to memorize the sound of her forever. "I had everything," he told a friend recently. "Fame, success, love, but I didn't know how to hold on to any of it." In public, Pacino still wears his signature black, the armor of a man who never quite learned to live in color after she left. In private, he writes letters he never sends. One of them, found among his personal papers by a confidant, reads, "You were the calm in the noise, the light that didn't demand to be seen. Every woman I met after you was just an echo." Even as new loves entered his life, none could stay. Lucila Sola, decades his junior, brought warmth and companionship, but distance turned their affection into memory. Noor Alfallah, the young film producer who gave birth to his son in 2023, brought a strange tenderness to his twilight years, yet he admitted that it felt different, more like gratitude than romance. Each woman offered connection. None could replace the gravity of Diane. At 85, Pacino has finally begun to speak of her without flinching. In an interview filmed quietly for a documentary, he confessed that after Diane's passing, the house got too quiet. He kept her letters in a drawer beside his bed, yellowed and folded from years of rereading. Some nights, he would open one, trace the handwriting with trembling fingers, and whisper, "I'm sorry I wasn't brave." The world remembers Al Pacino as a legend, The man whose eyes could ignite an entire screen. Whose voice could bend silence into thunder. But behind the legend is a man who gave his soul to his art and in doing so, lost the only heart that ever made him want to stop performing. He is both victor and prisoner of his own greatness. People think greatness fills you. He once said, it empties you. You give everything away, and if you're lucky, someone loves what's left. When the lights fade and the cameras are gone, he often sits by the window, watching the city glitter below. The laughter, the applause, the chaos of fame, all distant echoes now. Sometimes he imagines Diane walking through the door again, wearing that wide-brimmed hat, smiling that fearless smile, asking, "So, Al, are you still pretending you don't need anyone?" He smiles at the thought, even as his eyes glisten, because somewhere, he knows that every character he ever played, every moment of rage, tenderness, or longing, was just another attempt to speak to her through the language he understood best, performance. When his story is finally told, people will remember his roles, his awards, his brilliance, but those who truly listen will hear something else, the soft sigh of a man who conquered the world but never conquered his own fear of love. And in that sigh, the truth lingers. Loneliness was the price of greatness, and Diane Keaton was the love he could never afford to lose. Maybe, he once murmured, our kind of love isn't meant for forever. Maybe it's meant to haunt. And so it does, beautifully, endlessly, like the final note of a song that refuses to fade.